stab, slash, stab, 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 stab. I'm here to kill you. With deliciousness. This is Far East Fusion, the series that fuses a dish from the Far East with a Western dish and also attempts to teach you how to cook at the same time. I'm not a professional cook. I'm still learning the many techniques, processes, and flavor combinations that are involved with cooking, and this series will hopefully help us learn together. This is not a recipe, this is creativity. I've never made this dish before, so it might be horrible, but that's okay, as long as we learn something in the process. Today I'm combining a much-loved Chinese dish, pineapple pork, or often called sweet and sour pork, because it is exactly that, sweet and sour, but it's also crispy, it's gooey, and I think it would work wonderfully in a taco. I'm gonna make homemade tortillas, and I'm gonna top it all with a Mexican coleslaw that has some tang, some fresh notes, and some heat in it. Let's get started by getting that pork marinating. We're gonna use around 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and I'm going to grate an onion, 3 cloves of garlic, and about an inch of ginger. Give that a stir and we'll put the pork in it. Oh, but first we need to cut the pork. So this is my pork roast. It comes from the shoulder of the pig. You can use another cut though. Traditionally the recipe calls for a fatty cut, but it would work with something like a pork loin too. I'm gonna trim and cut this against the grain into little slices like this. In the kitchens of China, they almost always use a cleaver. It's actually pretty amazing to watch a cook work with it. For a dish like this, they would sometimes smack the meat to flatten it out after cutting it, or even take the heel of their knife and tenderize it. Okay, all cut up, so in the marinade it goes. A quick stir to coat it all, and we'll leave that covered in the fridge for about an hour to both tenderize and add flavor to the pork. Next up is the coleslaw. I'm looking for about 500 grams of cabbage, so I will core it and start slicing it into very thin strips. I'll toss it with salt. We're gonna need a bigger bowl. I don't have a bigger bowl, so I'm gonna divide it into 2 so I have more space to work. And I'll chop and add a nice bunch of cilantro. Next up, a jalapeno. If you can't handle the heat, feel free to omit this, but I want a nice blast of heat, so I'm gonna chop it up, seeds and all. And a half a red onion sliced thinly. Limes. I'll zest this lime. I think lime zest is really underrated. If you're using juice, you might as well add the zest as well. So the zest and the juice of 2 limes. And I'll finish this off with some olive oil, around 2 tablespoons in total. Now I'll just give this a good toss. I'll combine the bowls and we'll taste to make sure it's good. I'm gonna add a bit more salt, but otherwise it's pretty tasty and it's ready to go. So I'll cover it and put it in the fridge until everything else is done. And it's tortilla time. I don't know why I keep picking things that involve dough, but here we go. Let's experiment a bit here. I'm gonna do a batch of normal wheat flour tortillas, so 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour in this bowl. And I'm gonna try a batch with a bit of rice flour in it. Let's go a cup of wheat flour and a half cup of rice flour. I really don't know if this is gonna work out, but I guess we'll see. You can place your bets now. To both of these, I'll add a half teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of baking powder. Give those a quick mix, and then we're adding olive oil, 1/3 of a cup between the 2, so 1/6 of a cup each. And a half cup of warmish water for each. I'll mix with my finger to incorporate it until it's a ball of dough. And then we can start kneading it. And now we'll flour our working surface and start rolling these guys into a tube. Cut it into 8 pieces, shape each piece into a ball, cover them in flour, and then flatten them out with your hands. Now they need to rest for 15 minutes. Now I'm going to make the really simple batter for our pork. We'll start with 230 grams of cornstarch. It actually works better to use potato starch, but I wasn't able to find any. But if you can get some, you'll be able to get your pork crispier by using it. Into a bowl, and we'll add 1.5 cups of water and then mix it. Cornstarch mixed with water is a weird thing. In science, it's called a non-Newtonian fluid. I won't pretend to know exactly what that means, but I know that if you try to vigorously stir it, it acts like a solid. But if I slowly stir it, it will become more like a liquid. When it's all mixed up, I'll let it sit for 15 minutes. Back to the tortillas. Let's finish these off. Grab one and start rolling it out with a rolling pin. Try to keep them round and try to roll them as thin as you can. I've got a frying pan heating up with some oil just barely coating the bottom of it. Toss it in and start on the next one. After a minute, you'll see it starting to bubble. Flip it and give it a minute or so on the other side. If it bubbles up in less than a minute, turn the heat down a bit. If it doesn't bubble in a minute, then you want to turn it up a little bit. I'll start stacking the finished tortillas in a pan with a lid on, which will keep the moisture from escaping so the tortillas won't go hard. I got this tortilla recipe from a blog called the Café Sucre Farine. This is our go-to wheat flour tortilla recipe. I've made it before and I'll surely make it again. They always come out perfect. In the description below, you'll find the link to it. Here I have the rice ones. They're a bit drier. They're not cooking up the same. The bubbles are finer. This might be a fail. It's too hard. I'll try lowering the heat and cooking it for last time, but I doubt these are going to work for us. The taste isn't bad, but it's not going to bend properly for our tacos. Okay, our time is up for the cornstarch. Now I'll just almost drop my phone and struggle for a bit to put it in my pocket. My water and cornstarch has separated and there's a layer of water on top. I'll pour that off, we don't need it. Now I'm left with a really thick paste and we'll use that to batter our pork. Check it out, I finally got a wok, but it doesn't work on my induction, so I had to get a hot plate too. We're gonna deep fry this pork, so I'll heat up a bunch of canola oil in it. Try to get the bits of garlic and grated onion off of each pork slice, and then toss it into the cornstarch batter. Give it a mix and make sure all your pork is coated. You'll notice it's hard to mix, but just take your time with it and it'll become easier to work with. This isn't on. What's going on here? Okay, I got it working and it's hot. Let's toss the pork in, one piece at a time, being careful because of the splashback. The oil should be around 125 degrees Celsius, and it should only take a couple of minutes to cook. Okay, we'll scoop them out and put them on this tray that has slits in it so the oil can drain, and it also lets the air flow around the pork so it doesn't go soggy. I'll try another batch, I guess. This stupid hot plate isn't powerful enough to get the oil to the temperature we want. Alright, I'm going to switch to a frying pan. I'll just strain the oil from the wok into the frying pan. The ones I've already cooked are fine to eat, but they're not as crispy as I'd like, so let's get this nice and hot and do the rest in the frying pan. And these turned out much better. You can see the color difference. So what's next? Well, we deep fry it all again. Same temperature, but just for 30 seconds or so. This extra blast will help brown them and crisp them up even more. That's much better. The pork is nice and crispy now. It tastes great with hints of garlic and onion. It's now time to make the sauce. We'll start with a 1/4 cup of water, a 1/2 cup of sugar for our sweet, a 1/2 cup of vinegar for our sour, and 2 splashes of soy sauce for the salt. I'm also going to add a bit of sesame oil because it's amazing. Mix that until the sugar is dissolved. Now we got a yellow pepper. You could use a red pepper or green pepper instead. 1/2 a red onion, and a couple of tomatoes. Oh, and we need our pineapple. This came from a whole pineapple, which will probably give you more flavor, but you can use a can of drained pineapple if that works better for you. I'll cut the tomatoes into wedges, cut the onion into chunks, cut the yellow pepper into chunks as well, and I'll cut the pineapple a bit smaller. I'm actually using a combination of recipes for this one. There are several different versions of this dish in China. The most famous is the Cantonese version from Guangzhou, which is the version that most people around the world have tried. Many people from the area immigrated to other parts of the world. Most of the Chinese food outside of China came from the Guangzhou area. The other version I like is the northeastern version. It came from the province of Harbin. This is one of the coldest provinces in China, so their version is a bit heartier. It's usually just pork, no fresh pineapple or vegetables. So I guess I'll give the wok a second chance. Get it nice and hot and then add around 3 tablespoons of oil. I'm reusing the oil I deep fried in after running it through a strainer. I wouldn't do this with any oil that has flavor though, like olive oil. The trick to not having stuff stick in a wok is to heat it up first and then add the oil and give it a swirl. We'll start with the tomatoes. These will help to sour our sauce even more. Let's put a splash of Shaoxing wine in. I'm going to cook these tomatoes until they're a mush. If you prefer, I've also seen recipes of this dish that use tomato paste. The tomatoes are eventually getting scooped out, so we're just looking to get the flavors out. They're nice and soft now, so I'll add the sauce mix from earlier, and we're going to simmer that for about 5 minutes. That's our sweet and sour sauce. Ooh, it's really good, super tangy. We can scoop out the tomatoes now. So we got our sauce finished, and we're going to add the pepper, onion, and pineapple and let it cook down. Meanwhile, I'll make a cornstarch slurry. It's real simple, a bit of cornstarch and a splash of water. I'll mix it up and set it aside. It'll be used to thicken our sauce. This is a very popular technique in China. In the West, it's more common to cook the food longer and let the water evaporate out, but in China, they're all about getting the food out quick and cooking everything fresh. I'm definitely going to need a bit of that slurry to turn this liquid into something gooey and sticky. Now that it's nice and thick, we'll toss in our pork. It's already cooked, so we don't want to cook this for long. We're just looking to heat it up and coat it, otherwise the pork will lose its crispiness. Okay, we're ready to assemble. Our tortillas are still nice and moist. I'll load them up with our sweet and sour pork. And I'll put some slaw on top for the freshness and added crunch. And I can't resist a squirt of sriracha, one of my favorite hot sauces. Let's go in for a bite. I'm getting a nice crunch, great mix of textures. It's definitely sweet and sour, but also spicy from the sriracha and the jalapeno that's in the coleslaw. The coleslaw also adds a nice brightness, a freshness with the cabbage and the cilantro. I wish I hadn't busted that wok out to deep fry. The first few batches of pork aren't crispy enough, but when I do get a crispy bit, which is probably from the last batch, it's really great. It's what I wanted from this dish. I think next time I'll make more of an effort to find potato flour, because it's supposed to really take that crunchiness to the next level. Super delicious though, I knew it would be. How could it not be? I mean, I feel like I could taco half of China and it would be incredible. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching and please come back for more. Please subscribe and hit that bell icon after you've subscribed to get notified when I put a new video out. And happy eating, everyone.